So let's get to your second question. What's the next thing you want to know?
Okay. This time, I'd like to know, how do you decide when to stop? I know that you've had a number of projects over the years,
Mhm.
like that I've been paying attention to you for some
Yeah.
time, and there's been a lot of things that come and go. And as an entrepreneur, I've got that same struggle. I
Yep.
have projects, I have things that I've started. The problem I run into personally is I now have customer expectations. Occasionally there's money involved. Occasionally it's just subscribers. How do you deal with basically telling somebody you're not going to do something anymore that they signed up for? How do you decide?
Yeah, again a great question, and it's tricky, and especially I think for people like me, and I assume you, and I think also a lot of the people that listen to this show are the kind of people to do a lot of things, see new opportunities, want to try and start new stuff. And it's very easy for us to fall into the trap of taking too much on, or we try something and maybe it's not quite working, or maybe we decide we want to go in a different direction. And yeah, pulling that back and stopping is hard, and even harder to your point when there's money involved, when there's paid subscribers. One of the things that I didn't think about when I started, but I do think about now is it's great selling annual subscriptions all the time, but that also means you're on the hook for a year. And the truth is, and I'm not anywhere close to shutting down my paid subscriptions because I'm happy with how it's going. But it does occasionally strike me that if I decided I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to probably have to give back. This is my own personal choice, but I would have to refund a bunch of money. What I had not thought about before is the more successful I get with those subscriptions, the higher the cost of quitting becomes. And so somewhere in the back of my head, there is a little like, this could potentially be dangerous somewhere down the line. Like you keep becoming more and more successful, which is great, but this is a sort of ongoing commitment that you can stop whenever you want. But if assuming you're going to give people refunds, you're going to start having to shell out a lot of money to actually stop. So that is not something that I have solved at this point, although it hasn't yet been a problem, but it's certainly in the back of my head that it could be. As far as how I think about stopping things, one quick plug, I did an episode recently with Roger Nairn. I believe it's episode 15, where I talked about avoiding burnout. And one of the things I talked about was I try to have a policy where when I start something new, I stop something old. So that can help in terms of making a decision because it becomes a forcing function of, oh, I want to do this new thing. What am I going to take off my plate as opposed to just adding on? So that's easier when it's not a paid product. But that's one thing is sometimes it's a matter of just I got to stop something. And this is the lowest hanging fruit.
Right.
As far as paid stuff, as because you've been with me from the beginning, I've had a paid subscription product that I have transitioned into sort of a new product multiple times over the years. Just for context and background for people who haven't been around me that long, it was originally a product. There's something even before this, but the first sort of real one was a product called the Creator Accelerator, which was a paid community and a series of weekly emails with exercises for creators to do. That then morphed into I got rid of the community and morphed into a paid newsletter called This Is How I Do It, where it was a weekly email where I gave a sort of behind the scenes look at how I do something. And then that ultimately morphed into a very different product, which is the skill sessions video workshops, which I currently do now. Those are 1 hour video workshops that basically I do once every 2 months, and people can subscribe to get all of them or buy some of them individually. You can learn more about that at joshspector.com/sessions. Obviously, those are three very different products, and especially the transition from This Is How I Do It, a sort of basically a paid newsletter, into video workshops, really different. Each time I transitioned, I attempted to, or at least invited people to roll over into the new product. My hope was that the new product was bigger and better than what they had before and would help them in bigger and better ways. While it was a big shift in terms of what the product was, the end result that I was hoping to help people get was basically the same. So my hope was that most people would want to stick around for that. And if they didn't, I would give them a refund if it was a subscription, if it was an ongoing thing. But most people did stick. And the other thing I would say is each time when I introduced a new product, typically, because that product was bigger and better, the price was also more expensive. I let people stay at whatever their previous rate was. So that also, I think, helps people because suddenly they felt like they're hopefully getting a bigger and better product and also getting a deal on it because they had been in early. So I think all of those things certainly have made it easier for me to stop things that people are paying for. And essentially, while the way I deliver value has shifted and evolved, the people that I want to serve, creative entrepreneurs, creators, entrepreneurs, those kind of people, and the things I want to help them do, grow their audience and business, has remained relatively constant. So that makes it much easier, obviously. If I was transitioning people who, let's say now, people who had subscribed to my skill sessions, and I was like, oh, now I'm giving guitar lessons, that's not really, I could tell everybody, hey, I'm going to roll you over. But most people are probably going to be like, yeah, I didn't want guitar lessons. I want to know how to grow my business. So I think that's important. And but if I did make a drastic transition, right? If I did go from business advice to guitar lessons, I would just be honest and open about it and explain the reasons why I was making the transition. I would offer refunds when necessary or possible. I don't believe in if someone signed up for a year subscription to business advice and they got 2 months of it, I don't think it's right to say, oh, I'm shutting this down and thanks for the 10 months you paid for. That's not the way I operate. And I think I found as long as you're decent about it, like people understand. Like I said, most people that have transitions, some people decided it wasn't for them. They didn't want videos. They wanted something else. They left. Maybe I gave them some refunds. A lot of times they'd ride it out till their subscription ended and then just not renew. But yeah, I've never really had problems where people felt like they were ripped off or anything like that because you give people their money back. It's not that bad. Although it does, like I said before, it does create a cost when you want to stop something, depending how much money you have coming in and committed and all of that. So that is something that hasn't been a problem for me yet, but I could see how at some point could be not ideal potentially. The other thing I would say though, I come from a place that is very audience first, right? Very all about providing value to audience, even free audience, let alone paid customers, right? That is definitely my viewpoint. It's my take on content that like, I'm not creating content for me. I'm creating content to provide value to others. Doesn't provide value to others, then what's the point? That said, when it comes to this, I do think it's really important to understand that whatever you're going to do or offer, especially when it comes to paid products and commitments, it has to work for you first, right? And I can't be doing a paid product that I don't want to do for whatever reason. I'm burned out. I don't like it. I don't have time for it, whatever, just because other people like it and find it valuable. This is one of the areas where it's, I think it's important not to get trapped into that. Like you have to be able to feel like if I don't want to do this for whatever the reason is, I have the ability to stop. I can stop at any time. It may not be easy. I might have to give refunds. I might have to whatever. If you don't remember that, you can get yourself in a really damaging, stressful situation. And understanding that like people will understand if you want to stop for whatever reason, as long as you don't screw them over. As long as you don't just take the money and run, whatever, they'll understand. And so that helps, I think, with stopping something, knowing that I can cancel anything at any time. They're just things that, like anything, right? You can do whatever you want. There may be costs that come along with that, financial or otherwise, but I'm not trapped and not stuck. But so I'm curious because from your perspective, as someone who has been a customer of mine and an audience member and who's been through these transitions, and obviously you've stuck with it. And I think as far as I know, you've found it helpful, but maybe talk about that a little from your perspective of what you would expect, not even just from me, but just in general, like the perception of someone who has paid for something and then the person stops or whatever. How do you see that?
Each time you've made one of these transitions, the best way to describe it is it simply made sense.
Mhm,
It's clear that you were doing the same thing, but in a different way,
mhm,
that potentially made more sense for you, which, as you said, it just makes it easy to
mhm,
bring along, but still get value out of it, even though it's in a different form.
mhm.
And ultimately, besides wanting to support individuals from a customer's perspective, as long as I'm getting value, even if it's in a different form that still works for me, I'm
Yeah.
happy.
Thanks. I think the other thing I would add to that I think is interesting that you said that I didn't mention was if you frame it as in my intention is, and I think hopefully you pick up on this, but I think my audience does. When I'm stopping something or shifting to something else, it's always because I think that I might be wrong, but I always think that it's an attempt to make that better for the audience. I think this is going to help you more than the way I've been doing it. And I
Right.
think messaging that is really important because I do think there's people that stop things and go, oh, I'm not doing this product anymore because it was really burning me out and it was a pain in the ass. Is really different. Even if that's true, it's really different than to go, hey, I'm going to do this other thing because I think this is going to help you more. The feedback I'm getting that, yeah, what I've been doing is good, but I think this is going to be better. And even if you're wrong, I think people respond well to feeling like you actually are taking their interests to heart and want to help them more.
One of the struggles, I'll call it, is that's a great generalization of your audience. I'm sure that the vast majority of your audience, just like
Mhm.
mine, understands what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that as change in the approach continues to add value for them. That's not true for everybody, unfortunately. For
Yep.
example, one of the things that I'm in the middle of is a transition from writing books to providing online courses.
Hmm.
And some people love books.
Yeah.
Some people love courses. So
Yeah.
there'll be a different a different customer base that's going to be attracted
Hmm.
to them. No matter what you change, depending on your audience, there's always going to be, I'll call it a little bit of fallout. And I think you're right. The
Yeah.
messaging is key to minimizing or at least having people fall out in a positive way rather than in a
Yeah.
negative way.
Yeah, it goes right back to the very beginning, right? That nothing you ever do is going to be for everyone. Whatever you were doing at first wasn't for everyone either. And so it's like you shift and yeah, you're exactly. Some people like books, some people like courses.
One thing I wanted to mention is that there was a podcast that I subscribed to, paid subscription.
Hmm.
It was around for years, and he decided to quit. And
Hmm.
I had paid a full year in advance.
Yeah.
His approach to shutting it down was to basically give a year's notice. He
Oh, that's
stopped
interesting.
taking payment and then
Hmm.
just kept the service going for everybody
Yeah.
until that last person had actually gotten their full value out of their year's subscription. So that was another way to do it without
Yeah.
necessarily having to actually shell out money to terminate the project.
Yeah. You just have to keep doing it for a year after you don't want to do it.
Exactly. Or whatever your longest
That,
subscription term is. But yes,
yeah, exactly. Cool.